Story 1. The steel forest. The clock above the time and attendance terminal read 1:17 a.m., but the light was a lie. Elias knew the fluorescent glow of supercenter number 578 didn't mark time, it merely suspended it. Time here didn't tick. It hummed. A low, industrial thrum generated by hundreds of cooling units, acres of ceiling-mounted ballasts, and the constant, indifferent spin of the security cameras. He was 18 minutes into his shift, and the world had already ended. The front sliding doors, which during the day inhaled and exhaled the teeming masses of humanity, were now locked, dark panels of glass reflecting the ghost-white aisles inside. The store was a hollowed-out whale skeleton, and Elias, with his blue vest, worn headset, and miserable dolly of pallets, was the solitary, insignificant parasite cleaning up its remains. He was assigned to the infamous Aisle 12, frozen foods. Aisle 12, his manager, Brenda, had announced with the perverse cheer of a drill sergeant, "Is your personal kingdom tonight, Elias. Fill it, zone it, and try not to become a popsicle." Brenda, a woman whose skin had taken on the exact pallor and texture of raw chicken breast after 20 years of retail, had then vanished into the managerial hive, leaving Elias alone with his mission. Aisle 12 was the store's digestive tract, a long, concrete corridor perpetually choked with the dry ice smell of mass-produced nourishment. The freezers lined both walls, sealed glass tombs containing thousands of plastic-wrapped dinners, bags of cubed potatoes, and frozen pizza dough. Their combined cooling power generated a localized pocket of Arctic despair that fought a losing battle against the store's centralized heating, resulting in a thin, visible mist that clung to the floor and the lower shelf racks. Elias pushed his dolly, the polyurethane wheels squeaking a rhythmic lament against the polished concrete. He opened the first freezer door, a heavy, metallic sigh echoing down the empty aisle. The blast of sub-zero air hit him, momentarily clouding his glasses. He started stacking the ice cream bars, the colorful boxes a jarring contrast to the monochrome dread of the aisle. The quiet, which was never truly quiet, began to press in. The store had sounds, but they were the sounds of mechanical life, the hydraulic hiss of the distant baler in the back room, the infrequent clunk of a forgotten cleaning robot relocating itself, the perpetual, almost subconscious, drip 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 from condensation somewhere in the ceiling panels. But tonight, there was a new sound. It was subtle, barely registering above the freezer hum, and it seemed to come from the high steel canopy above the main floor, the upper shelving known to employees as the steel forest. The steel forest was the high-ceilinged wilderness of inventory that spanned the entire store. Heavy-duty racks reaching 30 feet into the darkness, loaded with backup pallets of toilet paper, soda cases, and seasonal decor. It was too high to see clearly from the floor, usually only accessed by the high-reach forklift driven by the two graveyard veterans, Dale and Manny. The new sound was like dry leaves being scuffed. A rustling. Probably a rodent, Elias thought, jamming a box of miniature cheesecakes into the shelf. The size of a small cat, judging by the noise. Great. He moved a few feet down, focusing on a pallet of frozen chicken wings. Rustle. Scuff. Pause. The sound was intermittent, and it always seemed to stop when he glanced up. The steel forest was a black, dizzying mass of shadows under the emergency lighting. The main overhead lights were too far away, illuminating the floor perfectly but leaving the upper third of the store in perpetual twilight. He checked his headset. Dale. Manny. Anything moving up high? Silence. He tried again. Hey. Anyone on the high lift? I'm hearing something moving in the steel. Brenda's voice, filtered through the cheap speaker, snapped back instantly. Elias, you are not authorized to use the high lift frequency for non-emergency communication. Focus on your zone. And I swear if you call me up there for a squirrel, I will put you on the dairy dock. Copy that, Brenda. Aisle 12. Zoning in progress. He pulled the headset off, letting it dangle against his collarbone. He hated Brenda, and he hated the dairy dock, but the noise persisted. It wasn't the scattered scurrying of a rat. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. Elias paused his stalking and stared up into the darkness above the produce section, directly across the main aisle from frozen foods. He could just make out the silhouettes of the stacked pallets. It looked like the dark, irregular outline of a small village against a low, gray sky. He saw it. A glint. Not the glint of metal shelving, but something smooth, catching the ambient light from the floor below. And it was moving. It was descending. Slowly, impossibly, a single object was being lowered from the second highest tier of the steel forest, using a rope or cable that was invisible in the dark. Elias gripped the edge of the freezer door. His mind, trained by years of mindless stalking, raced through possibilities. Was it a forgotten holiday decoration? Did Dale forget to secure a pallet wrap? Is this some new, asinine training drill? The object cleared the second tier, descending into the slightly better light of the main floor. It was a shopping cart. A standard, blue-handled Walmart shopping cart. But it was not rolling. It was dangling, suspended by a thick, dark cord that had been expertly, silently lowered from the 20-foot-high shelving, and it was swinging gently, like a macabre metallic pendulum. What in the actual? Elias whispered. The cart came to a stop about 10 feet above the ground, hanging directly over the central seasonal display. A cheerful, brightly lit arrangement of Halloween candy and cardboard cutouts of smiling pumpkins. And then, the cart began to ascend again. Scrape. Drag. Scrape. Drag. The sound of the rope being pulled across the rough concrete floor of the upper shelf. It was the only sound now. Louder. Closer, as the cart was slowly, laboriously hauled back up into the shadow-drenched steel forest. Elias ran across the main aisle, dodging his own dolly. He got directly beneath the swinging cart, straining his neck. He could see the dark cord disappearing into the blackness above. He put his hand on his headset, heart pounding. This wasn't a squirrel. This was a massive, expensive piece of equipment being used, silently and without authorization, at 1:35 a.m. This was burglary. Brenda, I need you to confirm Dale and Manny's locations. Someone is actively using a lift or ropes in the steel, above seasonal. I think we have an intruder. Brenda's voice was instantaneous and cold, without the static. Dale is on his break, Elias. Manny called in sick at 9 p.m. And no one is actively using a lift after midnight. The keys are secured in the safe. Then what is this? Elias pointed up at the cart, which was now just a blue speck, nearly reabsorbed by the shadow. Someone is hoisting a cart. Look at the surveillance. A long, heavy silence stretched between them, thick with the store's perpetual hum. Finally, Brenda's voice returned, low and dangerously quiet. Elias, check your monitor. I have 2 full security feeds dedicated to the seasonal section right now. And I see nothing. I see a cardboard skeleton in a perfectly still shopping cart 20 feet below the shelving. Elias stared at the spot where the cart had just been. The space was empty. The cheerful pumpkin cardboard was undisturbed. There was no cord, no movement, only the vast, indifferent darkness of the shelves. It was just there. Brenda, Elias stammered, his rational mind scrambling for purchase. I saw it rising. I heard the dragging. You heard the air conditioning, Elias. Get back to frozen. Your variance is already 10%. I am not going to write up a report based on a hallucination from aisle 12. The line clicked off, leaving him with the dry, hollow static of an open channel. Elias stood there, breathing heavily in the artificially scented air. He wasn't stupid. He hadn't imagined a massive metal object being lowered on a cable. He was tired, yes, but not delusional. He turned to look back at aisle 12. The open freezer door still gaped, the mist curling slightly at the edges. And that's when he saw the footprints. They weren't his. Elias had been wearing standard, non-marking uniform shoes. These prints were large, oddly elongated, and left a faint, slightly greasy residue on the highly polished floor. They started just past his dolly in Frozen, crossed the central aisle, and led directly towards the seasonal display where the ghost cart had been. The chilling part was the direction. The footprints did not cross from the seasonal aisle. They crossed to it, and they stopped directly beneath the towering steel forest, where Elias had just been standing. They didn't lead back. They simply stopped. Elias followed the trail back across the floor. He noted the stride. Unnaturally long, suggesting a very tall person, or someone moving with a strange, gliding gait. The trail led him directly to his pallet of chicken wings. The pallet was surrounded by a thin layer of condensation, melting slowly into the floor. But one box, a 12-pound catering case of buffalo wings, was missing from the top layer. Elias looked at the pallet manifest taped to the side. Case quantity: 50. Inventory count: 49. It hadn't just been a ghost cart. Something had used the cart to lower itself, take the box of frozen meat, and then haul the cart back up into the shadows. He looked up again at the steel forest. He thought of the unnaturally long stride of the prince. He thought of the sheer weight of a shopping cart, which Dale usually needed the high lift winch to raise if it got stuck. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. The sound was back, faint but undeniable, coming from the black, high corner of the store, near the home goods section. Elias had to report it. He had to. This was not a hallucination. This was active theft. Or worse, the beginning of a truly bad night. He started walking briskly toward the central manager's kiosk, which housed the main communication panel, the emergency override switch, and a direct landline to district security. He walked past the huge, bright red promotional sign for Valentine's Day, though it was only October. The contrast between the cheap, paper cutout sentimentality and the metallic, chilling air of the empty store was sickening. As he passed the paper goods aisle, he heard a new noise. A soft, wet thump. He stopped, listening. It sounded like something heavy and damp falling onto a pallet of bath towels. The noise had come from directly behind the high, 6-foot-tall wall of stacked paper towels. Elias cautiously rounded the corner. The aisle was completely empty. The shelves, neatly stacked, were undisturbed. But on the floor, directly in the middle of the aisle, sat the missing box of frozen buffalo wings. The catering box was ripped open at one corner, the cardboard soggy from freezer burn and the faint, melting ice. And the box was completely empty. All 12 pounds of frozen chicken wings were gone. Elias stared at the box, his breath catching in his throat. It had been less than 5 minutes since he'd seen the cart. The chicken wings were still frozen solid. They would take hours to thaw. Whoever, or whatever, had taken them, had done so quickly, silently, and had devoured or hidden all 12 pounds of them without leaving a single trace or drip of thawing water. He reached down, touching the soggy cardboard. It was cold, brutally cold, and sticky with a thin, almost invisible layer of grease. As he stood up, his gaze was drawn to the top shelf of the paper towel aisle. The paper towels, the entire stack, were perfectly aligned, perfectly zoned. Except for one roll, situated right on the edge of the top shelf, where it met the dark overhang of the steel forest. This roll was not aligned with the others. It was perfectly centered on the very edge of the shelf. And wrapped around it, as if to use it as a makeshift spool, was the same dark, thick cord he had seen suspended from the ceiling. The cord led from the spool, over the edge, and down to the floor where it was tied in a crude, industrial knot around the empty chicken wing box. Elias felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the nearby freezers. He reached out and tugged gently on the cord. It was taut. He followed the cord up, past the shelf, past the reach of the eye, into the deep, echoing chasm of the steel forest. The cord was thick, rough, and smelled faintly of chlorine and old rubber, the scent of the backroom cleaning supplies. He pulled again, harder this time. The roll of paper towel spun, the cord peeling off it like a fishing line under pressure. He was pulling the line taut, and whatever was on the other end was heavy, inert, and beginning to pull back. A low, guttural groan, not a machine sound, but a biological one, echoed from the darkness directly above him. Elias let go of the rope instantly. The paper towel roll spun rapidly, sucking the slack cord back up with a fast, wet zzzzzzzzzt sound. He backed away, stumbling on the polished floor, his eyes fixed on the empty space above. A shadow. Not a normal light and ceiling shadow, but a dense, living patch of ink, shifted in the blackness directly above the aisle. It was too big to be a person, too irregular to be a pallet. It looked like a vast, hunched, multi-limbed thing, using the structural steel beams as its own private scaffolding. And then, a sound that finally broke Elias's sanity. A thin, reedy, wet sound, like a finger scraping across a cracked pane of glass, followed by a whispered word that was filtered through something too large to have a human mouth. Zone it. Elias didn't wait to see the rest of the creature. He didn't wait to see the thing that wore his job title like a shroud. He just ran. He ran past the promotional signs, past the silent checkout lanes, past the locked doors that promised escape but offered only reflection. He ran for the manager's kiosk, intending to scream, call the police, or just quit on the spot. He slammed his hand on the kiosk counter. The light was on, the main monitor glowing, but the kiosk was empty. Brenda was gone. He grabbed the red landline phone, the direct line to security. He lifted the receiver, and the dial tone was not a tone. It was a perfectly clear, high-fidelity recording of Brenda's voice, speaking the words he had just heard. Elias, you are not authorized to use the high-lift frequency for non-emergency communication. It looped once, then twice. Click. The line went dead. Elias dropped the receiver, backing away from the kiosk, his chest heaving. The silence of the store returned, broken only by the incessant, mechanical hum. He was trapped. And somewhere in the darkness of the steel forest, something was hungry, strong, and it knew his name and his job. He needed to find Brenda. Or Dale. Or Manny. He needed to find anyone who wasn't a shadow wearing a blue vest. He looked at the digital clock on the kiosk monitor. 1:41 a.m. The night had only just begun. End of Chapter 1. Story 2. The silence of the dead line was a physical blow. It confirmed two things. He was alone, and the thing in the steel forest wasn't just stealing inventory, it was controlling the store's systems. Elias didn't spare a glance at the security monitors. He knew they would show exactly what Brenda had seen. Nothing. He spun around, pushing away from the counter, and bolted. His only rational thought was to get out of the sales floor, away from the vertical reach of the creature in the high steel. The back room, the store's mechanical fortress, was his immediate sanctuary. It was where the loud machines were, where the heavy doors locked, and where, theoretically, the two absent night crew veterans, Dale and Manny, should have left some trace. As he reached the back of the store, where the main aisles converged on the restrooms and the employee entrance. He heard it again. A high, thin whisper carried on the air currents generated by the HVAC system. 10% variance. Elias skidded to a stop at the heavy, reinforced steel door marked, "Employees Only." He fumbled for his magnetic ID badge, his hands slick with cold sweat. He swiped. The door remained locked. He hammered on the door, a series of frantic, muffled thuds against the steel. Then, the door did open. Not because he hammered, but because the lock was electronically released. The door swung inward slowly, hissing on its pneumatic hinges. Elias hesitated, then stepped across the threshold, into the cold, gray world of the back room. He quickly shut and locked the man door behind him, the thunk of the steel bolt engaging offering a brief, false sense of security. The back room was a maze of cinderblock, polished concrete, and towering metal cages. It was supposed to be a place of organized chaos, the constant sound of machinery, but tonight, it was dead silent. The silence here was heavy, industrial, like a battleship moored and abandoned. The air smelled of old dust, diesel fuel, and the faint, sweet decay of produce scraps. Elias moved cautiously, weaving between the high racks and secured rolling cages, scanning the dark ceiling rafters for any sign of the creature. His first stop was the manager's inner office. He pushed the slightly ajar door open. The small room was empty. On the desk, a coffee mug lay on its side, a dark, viscous stain still spreading slowly across a stack of manifests. It looked like Brenda had left in a desperate hurry. Next to the main radio base station, which was flashing red with a system override, was a printout. Elias's eyes instantly locked onto the highlighted section. The detailed inventory variance report for frozen foods, noting the loss of 1 case of catering buffalo wings, exactly what he had seen taken. Underneath the table, scrawled in Brenda's frantic handwriting, was a single, huge word: steal. The creature wasn't just random. It was highly organized. He left the office and moved deeper into the warehouse to Dale's station, next to the receiving bay. The station was neat. Too neat. The high-reach forklift was parked nearby, the only way to reach the creature, but the ignition was empty. The keys were secured, but sitting on the operator's seat, pressed into the black vinyl cushion, was a distinct, wet impression, not of a human backside, but of something much wider, flatter, and segmented. It was the same greasy residue as the footprints in aisle 12. "Dale, where are you?" Elias walked toward the far end of the back room, where the trash and recycling were processed, the domain of the baler and the compactor. As he got closer, he noticed that all the pallets lining the walls were facing inward, an unnerving, deliberate change to the logistics. Suddenly, a massive, grinding sound shrieked through the silence. The baler had just cycled, but the sound was wrong. Too wet, too heavy. Elias ducked behind a pallet of canned cat food. He risked a peek around the corner. A silhouette stood at the feed chute. A figure that was vaguely human, wearing the telltale blue vest, but unnervingly tall and thin, its limbs ending in what looked like elongated, jointless extensions. It was holding a bundle, a dense, dark bundle, and pushed it into the baler opening. The machine groaned again. Then, the creature began to speak, not in Brenda's voice, but in its own. A low, thick, scraping sound, like metal teeth on concrete. Quote, "Product integrity. Essential." It turned its head slowly, and Elias saw it. Where a face should have been, there was only a slick, black expanse of skin, like a wet sheet of vinyl, punctuated by 2 large, circular points of reflection that caught the light, like the eyes of a deep-sea fish. The night shift glided over to the compactor, the machine designed for crushing general waste. Sitting on the floor next to the compactor door were 2 items, stacked neatly: a brand new, unblemished blue vest, neatly folded, and a name tag that read, Manny. The creature grabbed the vest and name tag, and with a swift, mechanical motion, shoved them into the compactor chute. The gears began to spin. The night shift turned again, its slick, featureless head pointed directly at Elias's hiding spot. It moved with the uncanny confidence of a predator that knew exactly where its prey was. He heard a faint tinkling sound coming from within the creature, the unmistakable sound of a headset static. It was wearing a headset, monitoring the silent channel. It stopped directly in front of the cat food pallet. Quote, unsold inventory. The voice was a mechanical whisper, filtered through the internal static. Elias burst from behind the pallet. He grabbed the handle of the pallet jack and yanked it out, dragging the heavy frame as a shield toward the freight exit. He slammed his full weight against the panic bar. It didn't budge. The creature was 3 steps away. Quote, emergency exit protocol. Requires manager override. Desperate, Elias jammed the metal forks of the pallet jack beneath the creature's feet. The forks engaged, straining the hydraulics. The creature didn't budge. Then, with a casual, almost bored motion, the night shift raised its hand, fingers tipped with metallic hooks, and brought it down on the top of the pallet jack handle. The thick, industrial-grade steel handle folded completely, bending at a 90-degree angle. Elias stumbled back, dropping the ruined tool. The creature stepped over the wreckage. Its voice, closer now, was a dry, rasping breath of static. Failure to maintain equipment. Write-up issued. In a final, desperate lunge, Elias darted around the night shift, scrambling toward the huge steel mouth of the compactor. He threw the heavy door open and threw himself into the dark, filthy chute, slamming the door shut. He was inside the garbage chute, but he was safe from the night shift. For a moment. Then, he heard a new, terrifying sound from the darkness beneath him. A voice, weak and muffled, coming from the compacted trash below. Who is it? Is that you, Elias? Don't press the button. It was Dale. The sound was coming from the cube of compressed waste at the bottom of the chute. And outside the heavy steel door, Elias heard the chilling sound of the compactor's power switch being flipped on. The deep, heavy groan of the hydraulic pumps began to fill the chute. The crushing cycle had begun. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.